That is what you deserve." Those words still echo in my ears, a sound that refuses to fade. My name is Zenobia Washington. I am 59 years old. Welcome to Whispered Stories, and this is the story I kept locked in silence for months until the silence itself became unbearable. That night at my son Orion's wedding reception, his new mother-in-law, Serafina, threw a bowl of piping hot gumbo directly into my face. I felt the searing heat pierce my skin, the spices burning my eyes, the thick broth dripping down my ivory silk blouse. But what burned me more than the soup was the smile. That calm, almost satisfied smile she wore as she looked at me with narrowed eyes, as if she had just done something she had been waiting to do for years. "That is what you deserve," she repeated with a firm voice, lifting her chin. The banquet hall fell silent. Every guest looked down at their plates. No one moved, no one said a word except for my son, Orion, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us, the man to whom I gave everything I had. He sat there at the head table, arms crossed, and said in a deep voice, "She's right, Mama." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't ask why. I simply took the linen napkin from my lap, wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left, and stood up from my chair without making a sound. I walked toward the double doors with my back straight, even though inside every part of me was trembling. But before I left that building, I did something no one expected. I took my cell phone out of my clutch, dialed a number I had saved weeks ago, and said just 3 words, "It is time." Then I hung up. I closed the door softly behind me. No one followed me. No one asked anything. I got into my car, started the engine, and as I drove through the dark streets of Buckhead, back toward my quiet apartment in the West End, a single question spun in my head. How did I get here? Because there was a time when Orion would hug me and say, "You're my hero, Mama." There was a time when I believed a son's love was forever. There was a time when I trusted. But that night, with my face burning and my heart broken, I understood something I never thought I'd have to learn. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. And sometimes silence is the only weapon we have left. What happened after that phone call is something they will never forget. But to understand why I did what I did, I must first tell you how it all started. How a mother who gave everything ended up humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. And how I discovered too late that my son was keeping a secret that would change everything. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. Have you ever been disappointed by someone you loved? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. 3 years ago, my life was different. Not perfect, but mine. I lived in a spacious apartment in the West End of Atlanta with a balcony full of red geraniums and bougainvillea that I watered myself every morning. I had my routine. Strong brewed coffee at 7, sweet potato pastries from Mr. Henderson's bakery on the corner. And then I would open my small, fine tailoring shop on the ground floor of the building. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. After Orion's father left us when my son was barely 5 years old, I learned something that many women take decades to understand. That one can sustain an entire life with her own 2 hands without asking anyone for permission. I sewed wedding gowns, prom dresses, and embroidered blouses for church ladies who wanted to look elegant without shouting about their money. My hands knew every stitch, every hem, every secret a fabric keeps when you treat it with patience. Orion grew up seeing that. He saw me get up at 5 in the morning to finish an order. He saw me sew until my fingers bled. He saw me cry from exhaustion over the Singer machine that had belonged to my grandmother, and then dry my tears and keep going. "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to work hard so you can rest," he would tell me with his big, serious eyes, while I made him breakfast before school. And I believed him because Orion was always a good boy, responsible, affectionate. He studied without me having to ask, got good grades. On Sundays, he helped me clean the shop and asked me things about fabrics, about colors, about how I knew which dress each client needed. "Because I listened to them, baby," I would tell him. "People always tell you what they need, even if they don't use words." He would nod thoughtfully and then go play basketball with the neighborhood kids. When he turned 18 and went to study business administration at Morehouse College, I felt that every sacrifice had been worth it. My son was going to have what I never had, a career, a degree, a future without back pain or numb fingers. I worked double, triple shifts. I sewed dresses for weddings of families who would never invite me to their tables, but who paid well. I saved every dollar, denied myself Help. Denied myself loans because I wanted Orion to finish college without owing anyone anything. And he did. He graduated with honors, got a job at a top real estate firm. He started earning well, wearing suits that I tailored for him myself, bringing me flowers every Sunday when he came for lunch. "Thank you, Mama," he would say, kissing my forehead. "Everything I am is because of you," and I felt complete until he met Clementina. The first time Orion talked to me about her, I noticed something different in his voice, a new emotion, a shine in his eyes I had never seen. "She's special, Mama, very special." Clementina was the only daughter of a wealthy family from Buckhead. Her father owned a chain of hardware supply stores. Her mother, Serafina, was one of those women who had never worked a day in her life, but knew how to give orders like a general. When Orion told me he wanted to introduce me to her, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one, with embroidery on the collar that I had made for a distant cousin's wedding. I fixed my hair, put on the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I wanted to make a good impression. The meeting was at a restaurant in Buckhead that I would never have chosen. Too elegant, too expensive. But Orion insisted, "I want you to get to know each other well, Mama. Clementina is important to me." Clementina arrived in an impeccable white dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was pretty, polite, but cold. We talked about unimportant things. The weather, her career in interior design, the wedding plans she was already imagining, even though she and Orion had only been dating for 6 months. I smiled, nodded, asked all the right questions. But something in my stomach twisted when she said, "My mother is anxious to meet you, Miss Zenobia. I've told her so much about you." The way she said Miss Zenobia sounded strange, as if my name needed a title to exist in her world. Orion took my hand and squeezed it, as if telling me, "Everything is going to be fine, Mama." And I wanted to believe him because back then, I still believed that a son's love was stronger than anything else. I still believed that what we had built together, just the two of us, for so many years, was unbreakable. I didn't know yet that some women view other women as enemies from the very first moment, and I didn't know yet that Serafina had already decided, long before meeting me, that I wasn't enough for her family. That afternoon, when we left the restaurant, Orion hugged me tight and said, "Clementina adored you, Mama." He told me this in the car. I smiled, but deep down a small, cold voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. "That girl is lying, and Serafina is too." 3 months later, they invited me to dinner at their house. That was when everything started to crack. Serafina's house in Buckhead was exactly as I imagined. Massive, cold, and full of things nobody needs. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, oil paintings, and gold frames. Furniture that looked like it came straight out of a decor magazine. So perfect it was scary to dirty it just by looking. When Orion and I arrived that night, Serafina received us at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zenobia, how nice to see you," she said, giving me 2 air kisses without really touching my cheek. Come in, make yourself at home." But I didn't feel it. Home. I felt like an intruder. Clementina appeared from the staircase, radiant in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She greeted me with the same polite, empty smile as always. "Miss Zenobia, how nice you look." Again, that Miss Zenobia, as if my name only existed with that prefix that made me feel old, foreign from another world. Serafina's husband, Reginald, was a large man with a raspy voice who barely shook my hand before returning to his armchair in front of the television. He didn't say much all night, just grunted occasionally and drank scotch. Orion seemed happy, comfortable, as if that house were more his than our small apartment where he had grown up. That hurt me more than I wanted to admit. Dinner was served by a young housekeeper who went in and out of the kitchen without making a sound, eyes downcast. Serafina didn't even look at her when she asked for something. "More water and bring the bread." I tried to smile at the girl when she served me. She gave me a quick, almost grateful look before disappearing again. The conversation during dinner was tense from the start. Serafina talked about her friends at the country club, the vacation they were planning to Hilton Head, the new SUV Reginald had bought. "Because one can't just drive around in anything, right, Zenobia?" she said with a light laugh. "One has to maintain a certain level." I nodded without knowing what to say. Clementina intervened, touching Orion's arm with a possessive gesture. "Mama, I already told Orion that when we get married he has to think about a bigger car. That car he has is very modest." Orion laughed uncomfortably. "The car is fine, babe. It serves me well. But we're going to have children, aren't we?" Clementina insisted with a sugary voice. "We need space, safety. Besides, my dad can help you with the down payment." I felt a knot in my stomach. My son had bought that car with his own money. I had watched him work hard to get it, and now this girl was talking about it as if it were an embarrassment. "I think Orion knows what is best for him," I said with a calm but firm voice. Serafina stared at me for the first time all night. "Of course, Zenobia. Orion is a very smart young man. That's why I'm sure he'll make the right decisions for his future, for his new family." The way she said his new family was like a silent slap, as if I no longer formed part of that future. Orion said nothing, just kept eating with his head down, and I understood something terrible in that moment. My son was letting them push me aside. Serafina kept talking. "Now, about the wedding. Clementina and I are already looking at churches. The wedding will be at the cathedral, of course. It's where my parents got married, my grandparents, the whole family, and the reception at the St. Regis. Nothing too ostentatious, but elegant, because things must be done properly, right?" I nodded, feeling my throat close up. No one had asked me anything. No one had included me in these plans. It was as if my son's wedding didn't belong to me. "And what do you think, Zenobia?" Serafina asked suddenly with that fake smile. "Do you like the idea?" "It sounds beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. "The important thing is that Orion and Clementina are happy." "Exactly," she said, raising her wine glass. "The important thing is that they are happy and that they start well without burdens." Without burdens. The word hung in the air like poison. Clementina got up to go to the bathroom. Reginald fell asleep in his armchair, and Serafina took that moment to lean toward me, her voice low but clear. "Zenobia, you seem like a reasonable woman, so I'm going to be direct with you. Orion is a good boy, but he's accustomed to a certain life, a simple life, and that's fine. But now he is going to be part of our family, and our family has expectations." "Expectations," I repeated, feeling the heat rise up my neck. "Yes, expectations. Clementina needs stability, a husband who can provide, and Orion needs to focus on his future, not on the past." Her eyes bored into me. "The past," I whispered. "Don't misunderstand me, Zenobia. I know you've done a lot for your son. That is admirable. But now it is time for him to fly alone, without strings, without emotional dependencies." I felt as if she had stabbed a knife into my chest. "I have never been a burden to my son," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Of course not," she said, smiling. "But now Orion has other priorities, and I am sure that you, as a good mother, will know how to step aside when necessary." I couldn't respond because at that moment Clementina returned from the bathroom. Orion started smiling again as if nothing had happened, and the housekeeper brought dessert, crème brûlée. I didn't taste a bite. When dinner ended, Serafina gave me a small box. "A little detail, Zenobia. So you think of us." Inside was a fine china teacup, white with gold rims, elegant, expensive, cold. "Thank you," I said without looking her in the eyes. In the car on the way back to my apartment, Orion was quiet. So was I. Finally, when we arrived, in front of my building, he broke the silence. "Did you like Serafina, Mama?" I looked at him, searching his eyes for the boy he used to be, the boy who hugged me and called me his hero, but that boy wasn't there anymore. "She seems like a strong woman," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Yes," he replied, smiling. "She's incredible. She and Clementina are very close. It's nice to see that." "And us?" I wanted to scream. "We aren't close anymore," but I said nothing. I just got out of the car, said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, and walked up the stairs to my empty apartment. That night, while I brewed coffee in my old pot and looked out the window at the city lights, I held the cup Serafina had given me. It was beautiful, perfect. But when I brought it to my lips, I couldn't drink the coffee I had just poured because that cup wasn't a gift. It was a message. "You don't belong in our world." I left it on the table untouched and went back to grabbing my old stoneware mug, the one I had used every morning for years. That one was mine. That one knew the taste of my life. And as I drank my coffee in silence, a question began to grow inside me like a dark weed. How far would this woman go to get me out of my son's life? I didn't know yet, but I would soon find out. While I tell all this, I wonder where you are listening from. Write the name of your city in the comments. The following months were like walking barefoot on broken glass. Every step hurt, but I kept moving forward, smiling, telling myself that everything would be okay, that it was normal, that this is how things are when a son gets married, that I had to learn to let go. But the truth is, they weren't letting me let go. They were ripping me away. Orion started visiting less before. He came every Sunday without fail. He'd arrive with pastries. He'd help me move furniture to clean. He'd stay to eat and tell me all about his week, but after that dinner at Serafina's house, the visits became bi-weekly, then monthly, then sporadic, always with the same excuse. Sorry, Mama. Clementina and I had plans with her family. Sorry, Mama. Serafina invited us to lunch at the club. Sorry, Mama, we have to see about the wedding. Always Clementina, always Serafina, always them. I said it was fine, that I understood that he was busy, but inside something was dying little by little. One afternoon, Orion called to tell me that Clementina wanted me to go with them to choose the wedding dress. Really? I asked, my heart jumping in my chest. Yes, Mama, Clementina insisted. She says, you're an expert in fabrics and wants your opinion. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Maybe I had been wrong about Clementina. Maybe she did want to include me. Maybe it was all a matter of giving it time. On the day of the appointment, I arrived half an hour early at the boutique, an elegant shop in Buckhead with dresses that cost what I earned in 6 months. Clementina arrived late, accompanied by Serafina and 3 friends who wouldn't stop laughing and taking photos with their phones. Miss Zenobia, Clementina said, kissing my cheek. I'm so glad you came. We need your expert eye. I sat on a velvet sofa while she tried on dress after dress, all beautiful, all expensive, all looking the same to my eyes. The friends applauded. Serafina gave orders to the shop assistant, and I sat there quiet without anyone asking me anything. Until Clementina came out in a French lace dress, strapless with an endless train. What do you think, Miss Zenobia? She asked, twirling in front of the mirror. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and told the truth. It is beautiful, but I think the strapless cut doesn't flatter you as much. You have delicate shoulders. A dress with lace sleeves or thin straps would highlight your figure better. The silence was immediate. The friends stopped smiling. Serafina looked at me with cold eyes, and Clementina let out a nervous laugh. Oh well, it's just that this type of dress is what's in fashion. Miss Zenobia, I don't know if you are very up-to-date with trends. Her friends laughed quietly but loud enough for me to hear. Serafina stood up and put a hand on Clementina's shoulder. My baby, you look spectacular in everything. Don't worry, this dress is perfect. We're taking it. Clementina smiled, relieved. Yes, Mama. You're right, Mama. Clementina had called Serafina Mama, and she still called me Miss Zenobia. I stayed seated on that invisible velvet sofa while they kept talking about veils, headpieces, and designer shoes. No one asked me anything again. When we left the boutique, Orion was waiting for us outside. Clementina ran to him and showed him photos of the dress. Isn't it true? I'm going to look precious, love. You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the world, he said, kissing her. I hung back, clutching my purse, feeling like a shadow. Orion finally saw me. How did it go, Mama? Did you like the dress? It's lovely, I said, forcing a smile. Thank you for coming. I know this is important to Clementina and to you, I wanted to shout. It's not important to you that I'm here. But I just nodded. Of course, baby. That's what I'm here for. Serafina approached, took Orion by the arm, and said in a soft voice, Orion, will you join us for lunch? We have to talk about the final wedding details. Of course, Serafina. Mama is coming too, right? Clementina asked, looking at me with that polite, empty smile. Before I could answer, Serafina said, Oh no, my dear. Surely Zenobia is tired. Besides, we are going to talk about very specific organizational things. We don't want to bore her. Orion said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't insist, didn't say, My mother is coming with us. He just said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek and left with them. I stood on the sidewalk watching them walk away. And for the first time, I cried in public. Not much. Just a few quick tears that I wiped with the back of my hand before anyone saw me. I took the bus back to my apartment. I didn't want to spend money on an Uber. When I got home, I made coffee in my stoneware mug, the same one as always, the one that knew the taste of my life. The china cup Serafina had given me was still on the table, untouched, gathering dust. I looked at it for a long time, and something inside me whispered, "This isn't going to get better. It's only going to get worse." But I didn't want to listen because I still believed that a son's love was stronger than any external influence. I still believed that Orion was going to wake up, that he was going to realize that he was going to go back to being the boy who hugged me and called me his hero. So I kept going. I kept smiling when they excluded me. I kept saying, "It's okay," when everything was wrong. I kept swallowing the pain so as not to be a problem, so as not to be a burden, so as not to fulfill the prophecy Serafina had planted in my son's mind. "Your mother is going to suffocate you if you don't distance yourself." 2 weeks later, Orion invited me to dinner, just the two of us like before. I was so excited. I arrived half an hour early at the restaurant. I had dressed with care. I wore a burgundy dress that I had sewn myself with discreet embroidery on the collar. I wanted my son to feel proud of me, but when he arrived, he wasn't alone. Clementina was with him. "Sorry, Mama, Clementina wanted to join us. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I lied. Throughout dinner, Clementina talked non-stop about the wedding, about the honeymoon they were planning in Bora Bora, about the condo her father was going to give them as a wedding gift. "It's in Buckhead, Miss Zenobia. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, and a terrace with an incredible view. My dad says it's important to start well." Orion looked happy. I just smiled. And when the check came, Orion took out his wallet and said something that split my heart in two. "Mama, can you lend me $2,000? I spent a lot this month on wedding stuff, and I'm a little tight." $2,000? I didn't have $2,000 extra dollars. I barely had enough to pay my rent and the shop expenses, but I took out the money I had saved for the electricity bill and emergencies, and I gave it to him. "Of course, son, don't worry. Thanks, Mama. I'll pay you back next month." He never paid me back, and I never asked him for it because in that moment I understood something terrible. I was no longer his mother. I was his bank, his safety net, his plan B, but I was no longer the most important person in his life. That night when I returned to my apartment, I sat in front of the window with my coffee and looked at the city lights, wondering how I had ended up there. How a woman who had given everything, who had sacrificed her youth, her health, her entire life for a son, could end up feeling so invisible. But I still didn't know the truth. I still didn't know that everything that had happened up to that moment was just the beginning, that Serafina had a plan, and that my son, my Orion, my only child, was already part of it. The wedding approached like an inevitable storm, and I kept pretending everything was fine. Orion went weeks without calling me. When he did, the conversations were brief, distracted, filled with uncomfortable silences. "How are you, Mama?" "Fine, son. And you?" "Fine, fine. Busy with preparations, you imagine?" "Well, I got to go. Clementina is calling me." Click. And I was left with the phone in my hand, feeling like something inside me emptied a little more each time. But the worst wasn't the short calls. The worst were the invitations that never arrived. I found out by chance that there was a bachelor party for Orion, a barbecue at Reginald's house with a live band, with friends of Clementina's family. No one told me. There was also a rehearsal dinner at an extremely expensive Italian restaurant with the godparents, with close family. No one invited me. When I asked Orion why they hadn't included me, he got uncomfortable. "Oh, Mama, they were small things. Last minute we didn't want to bother you." "Bother you?" As if my presence were a nuisance, as if I were a problem to be avoided. But I stayed quiet, kept smiling, kept saying, "Don't worry, son. I understand." Until one afternoon, everything changed. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays have always been slow days at the shop. I was finishing hemming a gala dress when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a young delivery guy with a blue cap and a manila envelope in his hands. "Zenobia Washington. Yes, that's me. Sign here, please." I signed without thinking. The boy gave me the envelope and left. I closed the door and looked at the package. It had no return address, just my name handwritten in black ink. Something in my stomach twisted. I sat in the shop chair with trembling hands and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, many photographs. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. They were images of Orion, my son, in different places. Restaurants, a parking lot, a hotel entrance. But he wasn't alone. He was with a woman. And that woman wasn't Clementina. It was Serafina. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. The first photo showed Orion and Serafina leaving a restaurant. He had his hand on the small of her back. She was laughing with her head thrown back. The second photo was in a parking lot. Orion was opening the car door for her. Their faces were very close, too close. The third photo knocked the air out of my lungs. It was at the entrance of a hotel, the St. Regis, Orion and Serafina entering together. He had a hand around her waist. She was looking at him with a smile I had never seen on her. An intimate smile, a smile of a woman who knows a man's body. I dropped the photographs to the floor. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold them. My heart was beating so hard I felt it was going to burst. No, this cannot be real. I picked up the photos with clumsy fingers. I looked at them again and again, looking for some logical explanation. Maybe it was a business lunch. Maybe Serafina needed help with something. Maybe. But there were more photos. Orion kissing Serafina's cheek too close to her lips. Serafina adjusting Orion's tie with her hands on his chest. Both of them entering an apartment and a dress I didn't know. And the last photo, the one that made me let out a moan I didn't know I had inside. Orion and Serafina on a balcony at night. He was hugging her from behind. She had her eyes closed, leaning against his chest, like two lovers who have shared something forbidden. I got up from the chair, stumbling. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I threw up everything I had inside until only dry heaves remained and a bitter taste in my mouth. I stayed there, kneeling in front of the toilet, crying uncontrollably. My son, my only son, the boy I raised alone, the boy to whom I gave everything, the boy who called me his hero. He was having an affair with his fiancée's mother, with a woman 20 years his senior, with a woman who had humiliated me time and time again. And suddenly everything made sense. That's why Serafina hated me so much. That's why she had wanted me out of Orion's life from the beginning. It wasn't because I was poor or simple or from another world. It was because I was her rival, the true mother, the one who knew Orion from before, the one who could see what she had made of him. And that's why Orion had abandoned me, not for Clementina, for Serafina, for that woman who had seduced him, manipulated him, turned him into her toy. I stayed on the bathroom floor for who knows how long, crying, shaking, feeling everything I thought I knew about my life crumble. When I finally managed to get up, I washed my face with cold water and returned to the shop. The photographs were still there, scattered on the chair. I picked them up one by one with hands that no longer trembled because the shock was giving way to something else, something cold, something hard, something I didn't know existed inside me. I put the photos back in the envelope and sat in front of my sewing machine, looking at the black thread hanging from the needle. I thought about all the times Serafina had humiliated me. I thought about all the times Orion had ignored me. I thought about the wedding approaching, about Clementina, that poor girl who had no idea her fiancé was sleeping with her own mother. And I thought about me, about the woman who had worked until she bled to give her son a better life, the woman who had swallowed insults and scorn without saying a word, the woman who had believed a son's love was forever. That woman was dead, and in her place stood someone new, someone who was no longer going to stay silent. I took my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago when a client had told me about a private investigator who had helped her discover her husband's infidelity. "Good afternoon. This is Zenobia Washington. I need your services." The voice on the other end was professional, neutral. "Tell me how I can help you, Miss Washington. I need more information, more proof." Dates, places, everything you can get on two people, their names. Orion Washington and Serafina Vance. There was a pause. Any relationship between them? "Yes," I said with a voice that no longer trembled. "He is my son and she is his fiancée's mother." Another longer pause. "I understand. And what do you plan to do with the information, Miss Washington?" I looked out the shop window. The city lights were starting to turn on. The sky was dyed orange and violet. "I don't know yet," I said, "but when I know, I want to be prepared. I'll email you my quote. And Miss Washington? Yes, some truths hurt more than the lie. Are you sure you want to know?" I closed my eyes. I thought of my son, of the boy he had been, of the man he had become, and I said something I never thought I would say. It no longer matters what hurts. I need the truth. I hung up the phone, made myself a coffee in my stoneware mug, and waited, because now I knew that the wedding wasn't the end of this story. It was just the beginning. And I was no longer going to be the silent victim. I was going to be the woman who knew, the woman who waited, the woman who at the right moment would make a single phone call and everything would crumble. Have you also kept a painful secret? Have you discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew? Tell me in the comments. The private investigator's name was Booker Hughes. He was a man of about 50, ordinary-looking, with glasses and a calm voice that inspired confidence. We met in a discreet coffee shop in Dakar, far from anywhere anyone might recognize me. He brought me a thick manila folder full of papers, photographs, and reports. "Miss Washington," he said calmly, "I found what you asked for, but before I show you, I need you to take a deep breath. I already know what I'm going to see," I said with my hands clasped on the table. "No," he replied, looking me in the eyes. "Believe me, you don't know." He opened the folder and my world finished breaking. The first photos were similar to the ones I had received in the anonymous envelope. Orion and Serafina in restaurants, hotels, in an apartment in Midtown that, according to the investigator, she had rented specifically for their encounters. "This apartment is leased to a shell company," Booker explained, "but I traced the payments. They all come from Serafina, Vance's personal account." I felt nauseous again, but I forced myself to keep looking. There were hotel records, the St. Regis, the Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, rooms booked in her name, but security cameras showed both entering together. "Since when?" I asked with a voice I barely recognized as mine. Booker turned several pages and pointed to a date. "The first record I found is from a year and a half ago." A year and a half. My son had been sleeping with his fiancée's mother for a year and a half, since before he and Clementina got engaged, since before I met that family. "There's more," Booker said with a grave tone. He showed me bank statements, transfers from Serafina's account to Orion's account, large amounts, 10,000 here, 20,000 there, 50,000 on one occasion. "What is this?" I whispered. "Payments," Booker said. "Your son is receiving money from her regularly." The word hung in the air like poison. Payments. My son wasn't just having an affair with that woman, he was letting her keep him. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," Booker continued, "and this is the most delicate part. He took out another set of documents. I investigated the finances of Mr. Reginald Vance, Serafina's husband. He is bankrupt. The hardware chain that is supposedly so successful is on the verge of collapse. He has debts with several banks, and the house in Buckhead has 3 mortgages." I sat in silence, processing. "So, it's all a lie?" I asked. "The wealth, the money, the status, it's a facade," Booker confirmed. "A very well-constructed facade, but it's falling apart, and I think Serafina knows it. That's why she's using her daughter." "Using Clementina? How?" Booker took out more papers. Clementina inherited a considerable fortune from her maternal grandmother 2 years ago. Close to 4 or 5 million in property and bank accounts. But that money is in a trust that can only be touched under certain conditions. What conditions? That Clementina gets married. Once married, she has full access to that inheritance. And if something were to happen to Clementina while married, the money automatically passes to her spouse. I felt the air escape my lungs. "Orion," I whispered. "Exactly," Booker said. "If Orion marries Clementina and something happens to her, he inherits everything. And considering the relationship he has with Serafina," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Do you think they plan to harm Clementina?" I asked, feeling horror rise up my throat. "I don't have proof of that," Booker said carefully, "but I do have proof that Serafina is a very controlling, very ambitious, and very desperate woman, and your son, Miss Washington, forgive me for saying it this way, your son is completely under her control." I closed my eyes. I thought of my Orion, of the boy who hugged me, of the young man who graduated with honors, of the man I thought I had raised. At what moment had he become this? At what moment had he stopped being my son and become the puppet of an unscrupulous woman? "There is one last thing," Booker said, "and it is the most important." He took out an audio recording, a small device. I managed to place a microphone in the Midtown apartment. "It's illegal, I know, but I thought you needed to hear this." He pressed the play button, and I heard my son's voice. What if Clementina finds out? It was Orion. He sounded nervous. Then Serafina's voice, soft, manipulative, maternal, and seductive at the same time. "She won't find out, my love. Clementina is foolish. She only sees what she wants to see. But when we get married, how are we going to continue this?" Orion listened to me. Well, a pause. sounds I didn't want to imagine. Then Serafina spoke again with a firm voice. Clementina is not going to be a problem for long. You marry her, wait a year, maybe 2, and then things happen. Accidents happen. Serafina, I can't. You can't what? You can't be happy. You can't have the future you deserve. Orion, I love you. I love you like Clementina never will. And when all this is over, we will be together, you and I, with all the money we need, without hiding. A silence. And then my son's voice, so low I barely heard it. Okay, I'll do what you ask. Booker stopped the recording. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My son, my only son, the boy I raised with my own hands, the boy I taught about kindness, honesty, dignity. He was planning to marry an innocent girl to inherit her fortune, and he was letting a psychopathic woman put the idea in his head that Clementina had to disappear. What are you going to do, Ms. Washington? Booker asked softly. I looked at the photographs scattered on the table. I looked at the documents, the bank statements, the evidence of a conspiracy so twisted it seemed taken from a soap opera. But it was real and it was my son. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know what I'm going to do. You can go to the police, Booker suggested. With this information they can stop the wedding. They can investigate Serafina and Orion. What would happen to my son? I asked, tears falling down my cheeks. Booker didn't answer because we both knew the answer. Orion would go to jail for fraud, for conspiracy, maybe for attempted murder. If they managed to prove his intentions, my son would spend years in prison, and I would be the one who put him there. Think about it, Booker said. And when you decide what to do, call me. I'll be available. He gave me his card, paid for the coffee, and left. I stayed sitting in that coffee shop for hours with the folder in my hands, feeling everything that had been my life turning into ash. I thought about going to the police. I thought about talking to Clementina, warning her, saving her. I thought about confronting Orion, shouting at him, asking him how he could have become this. But I did none of that because I needed something more than justice. I needed Orion to see, to understand, to feel the weight of what he had done. I needed Serafina to lose everything she had gained with her manipulations, and I needed to do it in a way that no one could say I was the villain because I wasn't going to be the mother who destroyed her son. I was going to be the mother who let him destroy himself. And then when he was at the bottom, when he had lost everything, maybe, just maybe, he would remember who I was and what he had been before that woman poisoned him. I took the folder, put it in my purse, and left the coffee shop with my back straight and my head held high. The wedding was in 2 weeks, and I had a plan that started with a simple acceptance. I was going to go to that wedding. I was going to sit at that table, and when the exact moment arrived, I was going to make a single phone call and everything would crumble. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't to attack, it's to let the truth do its work. The night of the wedding arrived like a storm everyone expected except me. Because I knew that night wasn't going to be a celebration, it was going to be a revelation. I dressed carefully. I chose a simple navy blue dress I had sewn years ago. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that drew attention. I pulled my hair into a discreet bun. I put on my mother's pearl earrings. I wanted to look dignified because I knew this would be the last time Orion would see me as his mother. The ceremony was at the cathedral, as Serafina had planned. A beautiful church full of white flowers and candles. There were more than 200 guests, elegant people, moneyed people, people who looked at me sideways wondering who that simple woman sitting alone in the 5th row was, because they hadn't even given me a seat in the front rows. Clementina's family occupied the entire right side of the church, and on the left side, where the groom's family should be, there were only 3 of us. Me, a distant aunt of Orion's who barely knew him, and a cousin who came more for the free food than for affection. That was all that was left of our family. When Orion walked to the altar, my heart skipped a beat. He looked handsome, elegant, mature, in a dark gray suit I knew he hadn't paid for, with his hair perfectly combed, with a nervous but happy smile. For a moment, just for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be again, and I almost regretted what I was about to do. Almost. But then I saw Serafina. She was sitting in the front row in a champagne-colored dress that screamed money. Her hair perfectly styled, her jewels shining under the candlelight. And when Orion passed in front of her on his way to the altar, Serafina shot him a look I knew very well, a look of possession, a look that said, "You are mine." And Orion responded with a small, complicit, intimate smile just before standing at the altar to wait for his bride. I felt bile rise in my throat. Clementina walked in on her father's arm. She looked beautiful, innocent, radiant. The strapless dress she had chosen, despite my advice, fit her well. I had to admit it. Her face shone with happiness. She knew nothing. That poor girl had no idea she was walking toward her own trap. The ceremony was long. The priest spoke about love, fidelity, commitment. Every word was like a dagger in my chest because I knew it was all a lie. When it came time for the vows, Orion took Clementina's hands and said firmly, "Clementina, I promise to love and respect you every day of my life. I promise to be your partner, your support, your refuge. I promise to build a future with you based on truth and trust." I had to bite my lip not to scream, "Liar, liar, liar," Clementina cried with emotion. The guests sighed, and Serafina smiled with satisfaction. When the priest said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," everyone applauded except me. I just watched them. Orion kissing Clementina, Serafina wiping a fake tear, Reginald dozing in his seat, and I knew the moment had come. The reception was at the St. Regis, a huge ballroom decorated with thousands of white roses, tables with linen tablecloths, crystal centerpieces, a 5-course banquet, a live orchestra. Everything was perfect, too perfect. They seated me at a table in the back, far from the head table, far from Orion, with people I didn't know and who didn't speak to me all night. I was invisible again, but I wasn't there to socialize. I was there to wait for the exact moment. During dinner, I saw how Serafina controlled everything from her spot at the head table, how she gave discreet orders to the waiters, how she looked at Orion every time Clementina wasn't looking, and I saw how Orion returned those looks. It was disgusting, it was brazen, it was sick. When dinner ended, the dancing began. The newlyweds waltzed the dance with the parents. Orion danced first with Clementina. Then it was his turn to dance with the groom's mother, with me. I got up from my table, walked toward the dance floor. Everyone was watching me. Orion extended his hand with a forced smile. "Mama, son," I replied, taking his hand. We danced in silence for the first few seconds. The music was soft, romantic. Everyone watched us. "You look beautiful, Mama," he said without looking me in the eyes. "Thank you," I replied. "You look good too." Another silence. "Are you happy?" I asked him. "Yes," he replied quickly. "Very happy." "Really, Orion? Are you truly happy?" For the first time all night, he looked me in the eyes and I saw something there. Something small, something that might have been guilt, or maybe just discomfort. "Yes, Mama. Clementina is wonderful. We're going to be very happy together." "And Serafina?" I asked, lowering my voice. "Is she wonderful too?" His body tensed. He stopped dancing for a second, then continued, squeezing my hand tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do know, son." "Mama, this isn't the moment." "When is it going to be the moment, Orion? When? After something happens to Clementina? After you inherit her money?" He stopped completely, let go of me, looked at me with hard eyes. "What did you say?" "I know everything, Orion. Everything." The music kept playing, but we weren't dancing anymore. People started looking at us, whispering. "You don't know anything," he said in a low, threatening voice. "You're inventing things. I have photographs, I have hotel records, I have bank statements, I have recordings." His face went pale. "Mama, what did that woman do to you, Orion? What did she do to turn you into this? You don't understand." He exploded, raising his voice. "You're never going to understand." The music stopped. Everyone was staring. Clementina came running over, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. "What's happening, Orion?" "Miss Zenobia." Serafina appeared out of nowhere. She stepped between Orion and me. "Zenobia, I think it's better if you leave." "Are you making a scene?" "A scene?" I repeated, feeling the rage rise up my chest. "I'm making a scene." "Yes," she said firmly. "This is my daughter's wedding, and I'm not going to allow you to ruin it with your dramas." "My dramas?" I laughed without humor. "You want to talk about dramas, Serafina?" Clementina looked at us without understanding. Orion was paralyzed. The guests murmured louder and louder, and then Serafina did something I will never forget. She turned to the nearest table, grabbed a bowl of seafood gumbo that was still hot, walked toward me with firm steps, and threw it in my face. I felt the boiling liquid burning my skin, the spices, the broth dripping down my dress, the pain, the humiliation. Everyone screamed. Clementina shrieked. Someone ran for napkins, but I didn't move. I just stood there with the soup dripping down my face, looking Serafina straight in the eye. She smiled, that calm smile, that satisfied smile, and said clearly so everyone could hear, "That is what you deserve." The room fell into complete silence. And then Orion, my son, my only son, the boy I had raised alone, crossed his arms and said, "She's right, Mama." Those words cut me deeper than any knife. Clementina was crying. The guests were whispering. Reginald was still asleep in his chair, and I just took a napkin from the nearest table and wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left. Then I walked toward the exit of the ballroom with my back straight, without running, without crying, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. But before leaving, I took my phone out of my purse, dialed the number I had saved, and said just 3 words. "It is time." I hung up, left the hall, got into my car, and as I drove through the dark streets toward my apartment, with my face burning and my heart broken into 1,000 pieces, I smiled because the call I had just made wasn't to the police. It was to someone else, someone who was going to change everything, and they would never forget it. I still ask myself if I did the right thing. What would you have done in my place? I arrived at my apartment with my dress ruined and my soul even more ruined. But I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I took off the soup-soaked dress and threw it in the trash. I never wanted to see it again. I took a long shower, letting the hot water clean my skin, which still stung. When I got out, I put on my old cotton pajamas, the ones with holes in the elbows, the ones I had worn for years, the ones that were mine and no one else's. I made coffee in my stoneware mug, the same one as always, and sat in front of the window to wait because I knew the call I had made was going to have consequences. Consequences that would start that very night. The person I had called wasn't the police. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't anyone who could put my son in jail. It was someone much more powerful than all that. It was Clementina's grandfather, Cornelius Estrada, Clementina's mother's father, the man who had left those millions in trust for his granddaughter. An 82-year-old man, a widower, a retired businessman, one of those men who built empires with their own hands and who didn't tolerate lies or betrayal. I had met him months ago at one of the few family gatherings I had been invited to. It was a casual lunch at Serafina's house. I was quiet in my corner, invisible as always, when Cornelius sat next to me. "You're the boy's mother, right?" he asked with a raspy but kind voice. "Yes, sir. I'm Zenobia." "Zenobia?" he repeated, testing my name. Pretty name. "And what do you do, Zenobia?" "I have a sewing shop. I make dresses, alterations." "Ah, you work with your hands like me. I like that people who work with their hands have soul." We talked through the whole lunch. He told me about his life, how he started selling tools out of a truck and ended up owning a hardware chain across the southeast, how he had worked 14 hours a day for 50 years, how he had been widowed 10 years ago and still missed his wife every morning. "My daughter Serafina doesn't visit me much," he said with sadness. "She says I'm old, that I smell old, that my house is full of junk. I'm sure she loves you very much," I said, trying to be kind. "No," he replied with brutal honesty. "My daughter loves me for my money, but I don't have money anymore. I left it all to my granddaughter Clementina because she does visit me, she does hug me, she still has a heart." He gave me his card that day. "If you ever need anything, Zenobia, call me." I like people who work with their hands. I kept that card in my wallet, and 3 weeks after receiving the photographs, I called him. We met at his house, an old craftsman bungalow in Inman Park, full of antique furniture and family photos. He received me with strong coffee and pastries. "Tell me, Zenobia, what is so urgent?" I showed him everything, the photos, the bank statements, the recordings, the documents proving the conspiracy. Cornelius listened in silence. His face changed color, first pale, then red, then purple with rage. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a long time. "My granddaughter is in danger," he said finally, his voice shaking. "Yes, sir. And your son? Your son is part of the plan?" "Yes, sir. Why are you telling me? Why don't you go to the police?" It took me a moment to answer because I had to be honest. Because if I go to the police, my son goes to jail. And as much as he has betrayed me, as much as he has become someone I don't recognize, he is still my son. I can't be the one to put him in prison. Cornelius nodded slowly. "But I can be," he said. "I just want Clementina to be safe," I replied. "And I want my son to understand what he has done, to see the consequences, to feel the weight of his decisions. And Serafina, I want her to pay for what she has done, for manipulating my son, for putting him on this path, for planning to harm an innocent girl." Cornelius took my hand in his old hands full of spots and wrinkles, but still strong. "Zenobia, you are a wise and brave woman. I am going to help you, but I need you to promise me something, anything. Zenobia, when everything explodes, and believe me, it is going to explode, you are going to suffer. Your son is going to hate you. People are going to talk. You are going to be alone." "I am already alone," I said calmly. "No," he replied. "You still have hope, but when this ends, that hope is going to die. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of Orion, of the boy he had been, of the man he had become, and I said, "Yes, I am prepared." Cornelius nodded. "Then this is what we are going to do. You are going to go to that wedding. You are going to behave normally, and when the moment comes, when they show their true face, you call me, and I will do what I have to do." "What are you going to do first?" "I am going to get Clementina out of that house that same night. I have lawyers. I have doctors. I am going to prove my daughter is incapable of caring for her own daughter. I am going to get a protection order, and the money, the trust will be frozen immediately. Neither Clementina nor anyone else will touch the money until a judge decides what to do. And believe me, with the proof we have, the judge will decide in my favor." "And Orion?" Cornelius looked at me with sadness. "Your son won't go to jail because technically he hasn't committed a crime yet. He's just a fool who let himself be manipulated by an unscrupulous woman. But he is going to lose everything. The marriage, the money, the family, the reputation. He is going to be left with nothing." "Good," I said firmly. "That is exactly what he deserves." And that was how we arrived at this moment, me sitting in my apartment, drinking coffee, waiting. At 11 p.m. my phone rang. It was Cornelius. "It is done." "Zenobia." "What happened?" "I arrived at the St. Regis with my lawyers and 2 police cars. I told Clementina I needed to speak with her urgently. When she saw the photographs, when she heard the recordings, she fainted. We had to take her to the hospital. My God, is she okay? Physically, she is fine. But emotionally, that girl is destroyed. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Zenobia. It is my daughter's fault and that boy's fault." "What happened with Orion and Serafina?" Orion tried to explain. Tried to say it was all a lie, but when he saw the proof, he fell silent. He stood there in his groom's suit, surrounded by guests who were whispering and pointing at him without saying anything. And Serafina, that woman, Cornelius's voice filled with contempt. That woman tried to deny everything, said the photos were edited, the recordings were fake, that it was a conspiracy against her. Did they believe her? Of course not. The scandal was monumental. Guests went running. The hotel staff didn't know what to do. And Reginald, that useless man, slept through the whole drama. And now Clementina is under my custody. We are going to annul the marriage. It was the same night. So legally, it's as if it never existed. The trust is frozen, and I filed a complaint against Serafina for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Is she going to jail? God willing, yes. The lawyers say we have a solid case. Thank you, Cornelius. Thank you for protecting Clementina. No, Zenobia. Thank you for warning me in time. You saved my granddaughter's life. There was a silence. "And your son?" Cornelius asked. "Do you want to know about him?" I closed my eyes, breathed deep. "Tell me." He left the hotel at 2 a.m. alone without anyone. The guests looked at him with scorn. No one defended him. No one helped him. He left in his car, and I don't know where he went. I understand. Zenobia. Your son lost everything tonight. How do you feel? How did I feel? Empty, sad, relieved, guilty, avenged, all at the same time. "I feel at peace," I said finally, "because I did the right thing." "Yes," Cornelius replied, "you did the right thing. Not many mothers have that strength." We hung up. I sat in front of the window with my empty stoneware mug in my hands. Outside, the city was still alive. Lights, noise, people living their lives, and I was here alone but with a clear conscience because it hadn't been revenge. What I sought was justice. Justice for Clementina, who didn't deserve to be used, justice for me, who didn't deserve to be humiliated, and justice for Orion, who needed to understand that actions have consequences. I hadn't put him in jail, but I had left him with nothing, without money, without family, without reputation. And maybe, just maybe, when he hit rock bottom, when he lost everything, when he was completely alone, he would remember who I was and what he had been before Serafina's poison corrupted him. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months, without nightmares, without anguish, without that knot in my stomach that had accompanied me since I received those first photographs. Because I had done what I had to do, not with rage, not with a thirst for vengeance, but with the cold clarity of one who understands that sometimes the greatest love you can give someone is to let them face the consequences of their own decisions, even if that means watching them fall, even if that means losing them forever. The days after the wedding were strange, silent, as if the world had stopped. I heard nothing from Orion for a week. He didn't call, he didn't write, he didn't come looking for me, and I didn't look for him either, because I knew he needed time to understand what had happened, to process the magnitude of what he had lost, and I needed time to heal. Cornelius called me every 2 days to tell me how things were going. Clementina was in intensive therapy, not psychiatric, but emotional. She had fallen into a deep depression after discovering the man she had married was having an affair with her own mother. "It's too big a betrayal," Cornelius told me. "Too twisted. My granddaughter doesn't understand how it could happen, and neither do I. How is she?" "Fragile. Very fragile. But she is 18, she is young, she will heal. With time, she will heal." The scandal spread like gunpowder through the whole city. Social media exploded. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation at the St. Rig and uploaded it to the internet. The video went viral in hours. Orion leaving the hotel alone, his suit rumpled, his face undone, Serafina screaming at Cornelius's lawyers, Clementina being taken out on a stretcher. People commented, speculated, invented theories. Some said Orion was a victim, that Serafina had seduced and manipulated him. Others said he was an opportunist, a fortune hunter, a man without morals. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle. Orion wasn't completely innocent, but he wasn't completely guilty either. He was a weak man who had made terrible decisions because he didn't have the courage to say no. By the second week, Cornelius gave me more news. The DA accepted the complaint against Serafina. They are going to investigate her formally for fraud and conspiracy. How likely is it she goes to jail? With the proof we have, very likely the recordings are enough. The lawyers say she could face between 8 and 15 years. 15 years. Serafina, the woman who had humiliated me, who had manipulated my son, who had planned to harm her own daughter to keep her money, was going to pay. And Reginald, I asked. That poor man knew nothing. He's a drunk who has been disconnected from his family for years. The investigators confirmed he had nothing to do with the plan. But now he is alone. His wife is on her way to jail. His daughter hates him and his business is bankrupt. Is he going to lose the house? Already lost it. The bank foreclosed last week. Now he is living in a rented room in Dakar on a miserable pension. I didn't feel pity for him because Reginald had eyes. He had ears. He had been there in that house for years, watching his wife destroy lives. And he had done nothing. Sometimes complicity is as guilty as the action. In the third week, Orion finally sought me out. He arrived at my apartment at 8 at night without warning. He knocked on the door with soft blows. When I opened it, I almost didn't recognize him. He had a beard of several days, deep circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, unkempt hair. He had lost weight. He looked destroyed. "Mama," he said with a broken voice. I stood in the doorway without moving. "What do you want, Orion? I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please, Mama, just let me in." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face to tell him to leave, that he was no longer my son. But another part, that part that had carried that boy in my arms, that had sung him lullabies, that had cleaned his scraped knees, that part couldn't say no. I let him in. He sat on the chair in the shop, the same chair where I had received the first photographs, where everything had started to break. "Do you want coffee?" I asked out of pure habit. "No thanks." I sat across from him, waited. Orion took a long time to speak. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mama. What are you sorry for?" Everything I did to you." And Clementina? Are you sorry for her too? He nodded, tears falling down his cheeks. Yes, especially for her. I didn't want to hurt her. I never wanted to, but you did. I interrupted with a cold voice. You planned to marry her to steal her inheritance. I heard the recording, Orion. I know what you said. It wasn't me talking. It was Serafina. Are you going to blame Serafina for your decisio? Ines? She manipulated me, Mama. She made me believe that I was worth nothing without her. That you had raised me to be mediocre. That I deserved more. Every word was like a dagger. And you believed her? Yes, he whispered. I believed her. Why, Orion? Why did you believe her and not me? Because she gave me what you never could. Money, right? Well, yes, but not only that. She gave me attention. She made me feel important. She made me feel like I was special. I made you feel special too. No, Ma,